We thank our partners, Beit Halevi, Berman Hebrew Academy, Beth Shalom Congregation, Chabad of Silver Spring, Congregation Avas Israel, Ezra's Israel Congregation, Kilat Pardes, Kemp Mill Synagogue, Oiv Shalom Congregation of DC, Oiv Shalom Talmud Torah of Only, Orat Torah, Southeast Hebrew Congregation, Torah School of Greater Washington, Woodside Synagogue Avos Torah, Yeshiva of Greater Washington, and Young Israel, Ezra's Israel of Potomac. We're very honored to have distinguished Rabbanim here, the Rosh Yeshiva of Lapiansky, Rav Reingold, Rabbi Weinberg, Rabbi Topolovsky, Rabbi Merkin, Rabbi Katz, Rabbi Katz. And thank you to each and every one of you for coming. I think this gathering is extremely significant on two levels. First of all, we think so much about Israel, we think so much about the Chayalim, we think so much about their families, but it's very easy to become numb. And if you're not thinking of people, it's very easy to, as we want to daven passionately and think and care, it's very easy to become detached, however shocking that may be. And if we hear of a person who was Moser Nafsho to protect Klal Yisrael, Medinat Yisrael, and we hear of how his family is dealing with this challenge, it makes it so much more real to us. That's one thing. The other thing is, in these terribly difficult times, we're learning and we're meeting so many great heroes. Maoz Morell, Hashem Yikom Damo, was a hero of Klal Yisrael in life, and there's much to be inspired from him in death. And his parents, Eitan and Varda Morell, both of L'chaim, are heroes of Klal Yisrael for raising such a child, and are people that can teach us and inspire us a great deal. This is uniquely significant for us to hear from the Morells, because as so many of you know, Varda Morell, Varda Lindsay Morell grew up in our community, grew up in this shul. It's very meaningful for us. I want to thank Dr. Moshe Linzer for facilitating this evening. Thank you very much. And it's meaningful on even one more level. Our shul's mission visited Israel while the Morells were sitting Shiva. And the Morells shared so much with the members of the mission. The members of the mission were so moved by what they shared and said. So it's very, very special for us to have this opportunity, and we're extremely grateful to Varda and Eitan Morell for coming to speak with us this evening. Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah. Thank you very much. The first thing you have to know about our son Maoz is that his entire life, it was a struggle for him and for us as his parents to get him up in the morning. I don't know how many of you as parents have had this issue, but it was really hard. I mean, he would tell us, wake me up. And we would, he's a big guy, and we would pull him up and pull his legs down, and he would flop down, and we'd try again, and he'd flop down. And then when he finally would wake up, he'd be like, how come you didn't wake me up? And he'd be upset that we didn't wake him up. Waking him up was always hard. 5 months ago, on January 15th, at that point, Maoz, here's pictures of Maoz sleeping his natural pose here. There's Maoz sleeping, our grandson, one was sleeping in the arms. 5 months ago, on February 15th, Maoz at that point had been fighting in Gaza for 95 days. And the way it works in Gaza is that the soldiers capture a certain area, and then at night, they capture a certain house and they sleep in that house. The house is their base. And that could be for 1 night, sometimes 2 nights, sometimes 3 nights, sometimes 4 nights. I don't think it's more than 4 nights too often. That's a long time. And they're in the house, and they go out from the house and come back to the house until they capture more territory and go to the next house. So on that day, it was 9 o'clock in the morning. This is pictures of Maoz hanging out with other soldiers in various houses in Gaza. And when they hang out in the house, there's a certain atmosphere. They hang out, they schmooze, they talk, even though there's war raging around them. When they're in the house, they can hang out. So here we have a video of Maoz that they took of him inside one of the houses. This is just here.
שנייה, יש סיפור.
קוראים לה נפש מצע הענבים, נתחיל? אתמול את בנפצה.
דורית קסדה לזה. זה רגש. לוחם.
אתמול את בנפצה. אחרי שהוא נפצע, פינו אותו. קיצר, לפני שפינו אותו, שאלנו אותו, יש לך משהו שאתה צריך צוותי? לא, כל מה שהיה צריך הוא הוריד. לקחנו אותו לאחזרית, העמסנו אותו לאחזרית. אחרי שהעמסנו אותו, התיק לא שלו, התיק לא למעלה, את הדורית. אני עליתי למעלה, לקחתי את התיק לא, הפוך. זה מסובך וזה, לקחתי את התיק לא הפוך, העמסתי אותו לאחזרית. אני יורד מהאחזרית, חכתי תסתכל מה נפל, מצע ענבים.
לא,
לא מצע ענבים בשבת.
וואו.
ומתי שבת? מחר.
מחר שבת. מחר שבת.
כאילו...
לא היינו קבלים.
וואלה, אני חילוני ואני עכשיו הייתי מאמין אחי.
אני גם
זה לא...
That's just a video that we got of him from in the house, and we put it in there just to see. And I don't know if you noticed all the shooting in the background. Okay, that's a constant there. So that morning, on the 15th of February, Maoz and these guys were all sleeping in this one house, and it was 9 o'clock in the morning, and the soldiers, there were 12 soldiers who were sitting in the living room of the house, preparing to go out for their missions for that day. And they were, doing their final preparations to go out, and all of a sudden, a grenade was thrown into the room, and it blew up, and everyone in the room was injured, 12 people in the room. Maoz was not in that room. He didn't need to go out with them. He was sleeping in the next room. And so when he heard the grenade, he jumped up. We now know how to wake him up in the morning. He ran into the room, and they had a paramedic, and they have a medic. Maoz was not a medic, but they weren't enough to deal with all of the injured at the same time. So Maoz started assisting them with medical care on the basic level that he knew. His direct officer had gone over, before they went into Gaza, made sure that all the soldiers had a very high level of medical knowledge, more than usual, which is why Maoz knew how to do a certain procedure that he did on that same officer, and it saved his life. He saved his life by doing this procedure that a usual soldier doesn't know how to do. And then he went from soldier to soldier, and he calmed them down. He did what he could. And when they were done with that, they started bringing them, evacuating them. Now, the way it works is there's this, in the translation there, he said tank, but it's really like an armored personnel carrier, which has a lot of medical equipment inside, it's like an ambulance, and doctors. And I don't know if any of you have been following this, but the level of medicine in the field in this war is much higher than in any other war. In the entire world, they're watching that, how the Israelis are doing that very closely. And you probably have all heard about a lot of soldiers have lost limbs, lost legs. And a lot of the times, yes, they lost legs, but their lives were saved. And that same soldier with that same injury might have died in a different war. So the level of medicine is very high. They had to bring the soldiers down a flight of stairs to get them down into the special ambulances, 12 of them. So they're going up and down and up and down, up and down. Now, while they're dealing with the wounded and evacuating them and dealing with them, the grenade that was thrown into the house was not a one-off shot. It was a planned, sophisticated, from the terrorist perspective, it was a planned, sophisticated attack on this house. They knew that the soldiers were in this house, and they planned this attack. So while they're evacuating the wounded, there's a whole battle going on defending the house on the street level. Move to the next. This is a video we have from a GoPro of the helmet of one of the soldiers of the evacuation of one of the soldiers at that battle. Is in there evacuating the soldier, and you hear the shooting going on all around them. That video was taken about maybe 15 or 20 minutes before Maoz himself fell. After the soldiers were evacuated, Maoz ran upstairs to get his mag. Now, what is a mag? Every Israeli soldier in the infantry has a specialty, sometimes more than one. But he has a special weapon that he learns how to use and he's in charge of, right? You have one guy that's a medic, you have one guy that's a sniper, you have all kinds of weapons. So Maoz's weapon is called a mag. A mag is a very big and very heavy machine gun. The main thing you have to know about the mag is that it gives very heavy fire and it's very heavy to hold. So usually when you are in the beginning of basic training and they assign you that you're going to be the one to carry the mag, you're not happy about it because it means that throughout the next, all of your training, and they go on these like very long marches with full gear. So when you carry the mag, you have the heaviest load. They usually take the biggest guy. Maoz wasn't the biggest guy. He was big and strong, but not the biggest, but he got the mag, which is very heavy. You can see in the picture that it's quite large. Next one. This is a picture here that I took off the IDF spokesperson Dover Tzahal website. This is Maoz fighting in Gaza. I know it's him because of its symbol, and I can recognize him there. And then the far picture, it's a picture of him also in Gaza, which is, as you know, on the coast, and there's a lot of sand there. So Maoz, after evacuating the wounded, ran back upstairs, and he got his mag. And he went up to the roof to be able to give cover fire for the battle below. He runs up to the roof, and on the roof is the head commander of the entire unit, and another soldier who's shooting, trying to give cover fire with like a regular gun. Like if any of you, I'm sure, have been to Israel and you've seen Chayalim and they're walking around with a gun. So he's shooting like with that gun. And that's, so Maoz comes up, this is what he told me. And Maoz comes onto the roof in the middle of the battle, and he has a big smile on his face. That's what he told me in the middle of the battle. And he, what?
Soldier.
Yeah, what the soldier on the roof, who I later spoke to, told me. He has a big smile on his face, and he says to me, Maoz says to the soldier, step aside with your toy gun. Like compared to the mag, his gun is like a water pistol. It's like nothing. He's like, oh, move aside. Let me get in there with some real firepower. So he goes in there, and he starts shooting heavy firepower, which forces the terrorists to retreat into the house across from it. And he's shooting for like 10 minutes, and the terrorists are forced to stay in the house because they can't come out because he's spraying them with very heavy fire, at which point they bring a tank, and the tank shoots down the house, toppling it on these two terrorists. There were other terrorists, but these two were killed, and the problem is that Maoz was standing on the roof, and the house that they shot was very close, like maybe between me and Varda, like maybe a little further, but not much, maybe between me and the first bench, very close. And so when the tank shot the house, so there was a lot of spray of pieces of house that flew all over, and one of them went into his eye and into his brain. And 38 minutes later, which is very fast, he was in the hospital. This is a picture I got of Maoz being evacuated to the hospital by helicopter. He's in the first stretcher. You see there's two foil blankets. He's the first one. And Varda and I were at home. It was a Thursday. And we get a phone call from the army that Maoz is, they tell us, patua kasher, which means seriously injured. Now, when they say seriously injured, there's a range of what that means. There's quite a large range of what seriously injured means. So we didn't really know. We had no idea where his injury was, or what his injury was, or the level of seriousness. They tell us in 10 minutes, we're going to be at your house to take you to him. So 10 minutes after that, they're in our house, we pile in. He was in a hospital, Soroka Hospital in Beersheba, which is an hour and a half from our house. We get into the car, hour and a half, we have no idea what's going on. We have no idea where it is, the level of injury, and the people taking us have no idea either. So after an hour and a half, we get to the hospital, and they take us right in to see him. He's lying in intensive care with all the intensive care stuff hooked up to him. And we still have no idea. And the doctor takes us into office. He says, I'm sorry to tell you that he has, what's the word? Irreversible, serious damage to his brain. And it's lodged in a place in his brain that it is inoperable. And so I'm sorry to tell you that there's nothing to do. There's no hope. I mean, he actually said those words. He said, there's no hope, ain't tikva, and there's no medical procedure to do. So we said, so what does that mean? So he says, now we're just waiting. So I said, how long? So he says, a few hours or a few days. So we walk out of there, obviously very broken, and we meet, there's an army officer whose job it is to liaison with the families, between the army and the families. And she says to us, look, even though it might not seem like this, I have to tell you that I've been doing this job, she says to us, for 10 years, and you've been given a gift. Because usually a soldier, the parents of the soldier get notified that the soldier has fallen and he's died, and there's a levaya, and that's it. Whereas he's still alive. So you have time to, they call it in Hebrew, lehi parade, to part with him. You have time to part with him. So we took that seriously, and she was right. And we started to part with him. And we would go into his room, and we held his hand, and we hugged him. And we parted with him. And not just us, his friends and everyone that knew him started to come to the hospital. People started streaming to the hospital. Basically, everyone in his life, everyone who loved him, everyone who knew him was coming to the hospital. And everyone that came, we told them the situation because we wanted them to know that this is their opportunity to part with him. And it shouldn't be that they don't know that. So everyone went in, and this was all Friday, and his Rebbe from Yeshiva came and slept in the room with him on Motzei Shabbos all night. And on Motzei Shabbos, he had a lot of friends that came. And usually in intensive care, you only allowed like 2 people in the room, and they're very strict. But in our situation, there was like no rules, like whatever you want. Like Saturday night, there's like 30 friends in there with guitars and like a whole thing going on in the room, and whatever you want. And then late Saturday night, after everyone left, we sat down with the doctor, and the doctor says to us, I didn't think that we'd be here still. And things are not progressing as we expected. Progressing meaning towards brain death. That was the progression. And he's stable. And he explained to us medically why that happened. And then Varda and I realized that we thought that we had seen the worst, but there's a worse thing, because he could be in this situation for days, weeks, months, possibly years. And so that was a very hard thing for us. And we have 6 children, and all of our children were in the hospital with us now. And we didn't know. So what did we do? Did we send them home? Did they go back to our lives? Some of the kids are married and they have jobs, they have a life. Do they go back? Do they stay here? We didn't know what to do. So the doctors and people, they advised us that we should keep everything as it is for at least another 2 or 3 days. Don't change anything. People who are here should stay here. So that's what we did. And everyone in his life, we felt already at that point, we have said goodbye. We're ready, because we knew it was a one way. It wasn't any chance of anything else. That was made very clear to us. And so we were ready. And everyone in his life had come there and said goodbye to him, except for one group, his friends from the army, who he'd been with for 2 years, and he was very, very close with, they spent all this time fighting together in Gaza, and they were still in Gaza, and they finally got out. It happened on Thursday. He'd been in Gaza for 8 weeks straight, and they were scheduled to get out on Sunday. They got out on Sunday, they stay on the base on Sunday, and Monday, they send them home for 2 days. And they didn't go straight home. They all got on a bus and came to the hospital. And they came to the hospital. They did not know his situation exactly, which I explained to them. It was very hard for them, of course. And they went in and they parted with them. And that was like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then we decided, Varda and I, that we wanted to do something we hadn't yet done, a special like tefillah of our family, just our children and us alone with Maoz. So we got everyone together and we go into the room and we have this special tefillah. We're like singing, saying Tehillim, and we were there very short, maybe 5 minutes, and we suddenly see all the monitor starts to plummet. All the numbers are crashing. And we realized what's going on. And I said, everyone, we have to say Shema. And so our whole family, all the siblings and us are sitting in the room and we all say, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. As we said Echad, we see all the numbers reach 0. And that was it. That is how he passed with all of us in the room together. As we walked out of the room, at that time, there were other soldiers in intensive care, not just him. The difference was the other soldiers, we saw how the doctors are fighting for them. They're doing this and they're doing that and doing the other thing. With Maoz, they said there's nothing to do. There were no procedures done. And there was one particular, and all those other soldiers also have parents that are camped out there in intensive care. And so there was one other particular soldier who had been there a month, and he'd been for over the entire time, I think even before, we'd been there 5 days, and even before that, they were trying to revive him from his coma. And he had very serious injuries all over. I think they sewed his arm back on. He had something with the eyes. He also had head injuries all over. He had very serious injuries. And they were trying to revive him. And the entire week, they're trying to unsuccessfully revive him. They're trying, and then it's not working. After we walked out of the room, we passed by his room, and I looked in, and he had as Maoz was passing, this Shachter, this other soldier, awoke from his coma. Varda spoke to his mother like a month later, and he was really much stronger. He was already talking. And so, you know, it's a wheel. Some people are up and some people are down. This final moment of his last hour when he was conscious, in that 1 hour, he managed to save lives, mamash save lives, to fight against the terrorists. He did a lot of very, very brave things. But what we learned was he was there a long time in Gaza. This is not his own battle. He had other battles. A month earlier, he was in a situation where a soldier was in a tank and an RPG was shot at the tank. And a soldier who was in the tank, Uriel Silverman, Hashem Yikom Demo, was killed. And there was another soldier who was very, very seriously injured, and it was a very complicated evacuation from the tank. And for a while, Maoz was standing about 10 feet away when this happened, and he was very involved in giving cover fire with his mod, just to keep the terrorists away so the medical people could evacuate him. Varda, we have a video of that, also from a GoPro. You're getting here shooting.
That's Maoz.
He's kneeling next to the... So later that day, about 5 hours, 6 hours later that day, Maoz and his commander went into a house to check it out to see if maybe they would choose that house to be their house for the night. Maoz was also in charge of camouflaging the house and fortifying the house, and it's another specialty that he was in charge of. And so he went with his commander into the house, and they're checking it out, and they look at the window. Maoz looks out the window. There's no glass on the window. It's just like an open window. And he sees in a building next to him, terrorists lifting up a gun pointing at him. So he yells and he gets his commander who's saying, lie down. So they dive down onto their stomachs. And then for 40 seconds, there's bullets whizzing over their heads. and Maoz crawls on his stomach to the other window, and he stands up at the other window with his mag, and he shoots. And another soldier went to the other window, and he shot, and they killed 5 of those terrorists, who were the same terrorists who earlier that day had killed Uriel Silverman. Later, when I had the opportunity to meet Uriel Silverman's parents, I told them, when you say Uriel Silverman, Hashem Yikom Damo, Maoz was a shaliach to that. And I felt like a certain connection with them. And Varda and I heard a lot of other stories as well. And what they told us was that, like, Maoz, he had like no fear. He had to do something, he would go and do it without any regard to how that would affect him. And we asked ourselves, where does he get this from? Because it's not from me. I don't know, Varda, it's not from me. So Varda will share some thoughts on that.
Okay, I don't think in my wildest dreams I ever thought I would be standing here, I have to say. Used to sit over there in the women's section. I didn't even know that a woman was allowed to stand here, but I think maybe not in my day. Anyway, so during the Shiva, somehow I had this idea that came to me, and I thought about my maternal grandparents. My mother's parents, Mordechai and Rachel Lederman. I'm named after Rachel, Varda. And they were living in Belgium in the beginning of World War II with their 2 little daughters, my mother and her sister, my aunt. Here's a picture of my grandmother, who looks, those of you who know my mother, looks exactly like my mother. And she's pushing my mother in the stroller with the yellow star. Maybe some of you have seen this picture. So in the beginning of World War II, they're living in Belgium, and soon after it begins, they take my grandfather. My grandfather is taken to a labor camp, and my grandmother is left alone with her 2 daughters. And unlike most of the people around her, she was able to somehow have foresight and read the map and understand that the future of the Jewish people, the future of her family, is in grave danger. And she contacted the underground, and I don't know the details, but I guess for whatever reason, they weren't able to help her find a solution for her, but they were able to take my mother and her sister and put them with a Christian family who hid them in the open, and they were well taken care of. And when I became a mother, I thought about what my grandmother did and about the sacrifice that she made, the idea of separating yourself from your children, knowing that chances are you'll never see them again. And she didn't. And being able to do that and to sacrifice your time with them and your relationship with them and being with them with the hope, a slim hope of possibly saving their lives, and maybe knowing that because of what you're doing, there'll be a continuation to the Jewish people. And when I thought about that story and I connected it to Maoz, to me, I saw a connection, because this feeling of Maoz was described by his fellow soldiers as like a machine. And in the 2 incidents that Eitan described and other incidents, he would just go in and do what had to be done. And his officer told us, like, you can't know how a soldier is going to act in the real war when push comes to shove, when they're really in that situation. And some of them freeze, but Maoz just went straight ahead without worrying about anything, about his personal safety. If needed, he did what had to be done to protect all of us and to make it that we are all able to continue living, that Am Yisrael is able to continue in Eretz Yisrael. And to me, I see the connection between him and my grandmother, and that heroism and courage that was somehow went through me to him. But Maoz was not always, this hero. He was a normal kid. He was a normal kid, and in the army, and physical things came easy to him. But this is him on his first day of school, looking all happy. Little does he know that he's going to go to school and everything is going to be so hard. So Maoz had a lot of difficulties in school. He had learning difficulties, ADD, and he struggled. He really struggled in school. And school, as we all know, is a very big part of a kid's life. I mean, after school, he would be in kung fu and playing flag football and, doing well there. But during those hours in school, which were many, he really had a hard time. Here we have a picture of him in first grade at his Chumash party. And when Maoz was in 7th grade, he started thinking about what he wanted to do for high school. Where we live, almost all the boys go away to a dormitory for high school. And getting into many of these schools is similar to getting into an Ivy League college in America. Like maybe not, but like there's 800 applicants for 30 or 50 spots. And Maoz knew that there was a specific high school that he wanted to go to, and because there's a good kind of guy that goes there, and he heard good things about it. His counselor in B'nai Akiva went there, and he knew that he needed to have a pretty good report card in order to get in. So in 7th grade, he turned to a good friend of his who was a very good student, and asked him to help him study for tests. And he would sit with Eitan every night and go over what he learned in school. And he would sit with me. I'm an English teacher, and here's my son in 7th grade, and he doesn't really read English because he had a lot of learning disabilities. So we would sit and do like remedial reading every night. We'd sit on a couch and try to go over and learn how to read. And he wanted to do whatever he could do to get into high school. And he did eventually. He was waitlisted, and he eventually got into this high school that he wanted to go to. And here is him on, it's a little block, but on the first day of high school. And this is him in 9th grade learning with his best friend. And in high school, he didn't have such an easy time there either, because a lot of the day is Gemara learning, and that was very challenging for him. And when you're in 9th, in his high school, they have every year something which is called the marathon, which is in the winter, like 1 week, where they don't learn any secular studies. They have just Gemara learning, and you have to like get points each grade. There are personal points, there's points for your class, and you try to learn different Gemaras, like how to explain each line, and you say it over to your Rebbe, and then you get points for doing it. And Maoz chose one of his close friends who was a really strong learner, and he would like tell him, let's go over it again, let's review it again, I want to go over it again. And he made the friend, like they walk around with him. The high school is in Emunah, okay? I don't know if any of you know this city, Emunah, but they're not used to seeing high school boys walking around the street saying over Gemaras, but that's what they were doing, like all night, walking around, repeating it. And here we have a video of Maoz telling over one of the sugyo to his Rav. I don't even know how we got this video, because they weren't allowed smartphones. So he had a hard time in yeshiva, but he managed. He made, he got help when he needed to. He got his high school diploma. He graduated. High school was over, and he decided that he wants to go learn in Hesder Yeshiva, which is like 5-year learning program with yeshiva and army. And there was a specific yeshiva he wanted to go to. Hesder yeshivas aren't as hard to get into, not such a big deal. In general, they take you if you want to go there. But the place he wanted to go to had a bechina. The Rebbe came and tested him. And he tested Maoz, and he told him, look, our yeshiva, we learn Gemara from morning till night. and you're a weak learner, and you're gonna have a hard time. Like, I really don't think it's a place for you. There are other places that would be better. And maybe you should look into that and go there. But Maoz wanted to go to this yeshiva. Now he didn't even tell us about this. We only heard that he didn't get accepted during the Shiva. So he never happened to mention it, but he went to a friend a boy from our yeshuv that was learning there. And he said to him, please go and speak to them and tell them that they should accept me. And the boy did. And they said, okay, you want to come. If it's not a good fit, then you find somewhere else. So what did Maoz do? He wanted to make sure that it would work for him. So he knew it was going to be hard. So he asked for help. He found his good friend, the one from the picture before, his best friend, is a much stronger learner. So he said to him, have a chavrusa with me. And he turned to the Rebbe and he said, have a chavrusa with me, and can you please have a chavrusa with me? And then he found like an older guy who had come back from the army, who he did some research, and he found that he was a very good learner, and he asked him to have a chavrusa with him. And how did it go? How did the learning go with Maoz? This was described to us by the people that he learned with, and anyone else who sat near him in the base medrash. So his chavrusa would read the line of Gemara and explain it, and then Maoz would say, "Ani lo mevin," I don't understand. So he would read it again and explain it. "Ani lo mevin." Read it again and explain it. Lo mevin. Again, explain. Okay, now I understand. Move on to the next line in the Gemara. Read it, and then they would explain it. Ani lo mevin. Explain it again. Now, when this scenario was described to me, I'm a teacher. So first of all, like, it's incredible because most kids are embarrassed. They have a certain level of pride that at a certain point, they'll just give in and say, okay, fine, go on. But Maoz knew he had to understand that line in order to move on to the next line. And he swallowed his pride and he just wanted to learn. He wanted to succeed. So he just kept saying, I don't understand, until he understood, which most of us don't do. And I also think about the person, his chavrusa, because, it's very frustrating. So I think it's very impressive that they had the patience. Maybe sometimes they didn't, but they had the patience to keep explaining it again and again. So, Maoz really tried to do what he could to succeed. And he was in yeshiva for a year and a half. And then Eitan's going to continue.
It was important to Maoz that whatever he did, he would always give 100% to whatever it is he did. Whatever he was doing, he was fully doing it. And that was the way he was in yeshiva. And then for an entire year, and then he started a few months into his second year in yeshiva, he felt that he was losing focus. It was very difficult for him to learn, to concentrate. So he consulted with us, he consulted with the Rebbe. He decided, okay, I'm not able right now to give 100% in yeshiva. This is the time to go to the army. So he left yeshiva and he went into the army and he got into the paratroopers, which you have to get into. But this here is his first day in the army. You see the pictures. In the paratroopers, you have the regular paratroopers, which is a very good and serious infantry combat unit. But within the paratroopers, there's a more elite unit called Sayeret Tzadchanim, or like an elite reconnaissance unit within the paratroopers. So just to give you an idea, so like a regular paratrooper, from the day he enters the army till the day he's fully trained, is 7 very intensive months. But in his unit, in Sayeret Tzadchanim, it's an additional 7 months. The training is 14 months. And the second 7 months is more intensive than the first. And the first is very intensive. And it's very hard to get into this unit. Usually they have what they call the gibush. The only way I could translate that into English is it's kind of like tryouts, except it's more like a 3-day grueling test of strength and endurance, both physical and psychological. The idea of the gibush is they have these 500 guys that are trying to get into this unit, and they basically bring them to the very brink of their abilities, like physically, and then they start with the psychological, and they watch you and they see how you do, and out of 500 guys, they pick 30. So it's a very good and elite and intensive and hard unit, and he got into this unit. And Maoz grew up, we live on a yeshuv, Talmud, everyone there is religious. He went to yeshiva high school, has their yeshiva, so his whole social life, his entire life, everyone he's in contact with on a day-to-day level is religious from kids, just like him. He gets to this unit in the army, and there's 30 guys, and they're not religious. There's like, 3 or 4 that are religious, and everyone else is very different. And this is an environment that's sometimes very challenging for a frum kid. And Maoz did very well in this environment. And when I think about it, I always think that sometimes I see kids, like high school kids, I see a lot of times that are very intense, and they're learning and they're davening and they're very, very strong. And I think of them like they're this burning flame of ruchnius. I see a lot of kids like this. Maoz was not like that. Maoz, I liken him more to a small, intense flame, like a ner tamid. And what do I mean by that? That means if you were to meet him, if you were to see him regular, not the burning flame of ruchnius, definitely not. But he was very makpid about certain things that he does every day. Learns every day. He davens every day. He talks nicely to people. He does all the things that you're supposed to do, but not in a burning, intense way. And I always felt about Maoz, and this is what helped him succeed in an environment like this, is that when you're a burning flame, the downside is that you need to have a lot of fuel to sustain it. So if you're in yeshiva like this, you can keep on giving in fuel of Torah and things like that to sustain this burning flame. But when you are removed from that, what do? Where a small flame that's intense but small can sustain itself a much longer time. And Maoz was like that. And he gained the respect of all the guys. When we had guys come to us in the Shiva, they told us, in this unit, they go on these very long marches, 70 kilometers, walking for hours and hours with full gear, very, very difficult. And after walking for many hours, they let them rest for a few minutes, okay, you can rest for 5-10 minutes. So the way he described to me, this guy, it's like they let us rest, and everyone is like, ugh, right? Everyone's trying to close their eyes for a second. They're walking through the night. Goes, Maoz. And this is a guy who's not religious. So when he's telling me this, he's, as we say in the Gemara, he's Meshiach lefi tumo. He's just describing what he sees without understanding the significance to me. So he tells me, yeah, and he had this little book, and he pull it out of his pocket. Every time we stop, he's reading his little book. When it's time to go, he would go. And what's the book? The book is called Mesilat Yesharim. Maoz, throughout the army, when he had a few minutes, he would learn Mesilat Yesharim. He was very, very connected to this book. And they all knew in the unit that he had this book. There was even a guy who wasn't religious who had a chavrusa with him in this book. And it was like a big thing. Everyone knew that he learned because he was always learning. He had things like that he did. This is the what's up. It was in Hebrew. I kind of translated it into English. And this is a picture of Maoz in a house in Gaza. Now, you can't see it so well from where you guys are, but if you were to focus in on what book he's holding, so they somebody printed up for Chayalim, Gemaras. Very, very, each one is 7 or 8 7 or 8 pages of Gemara. And each, when you open it, so it's very thin and easy and light and easy to carry. And one side is regular Gemara, and the other side, it's not Art Scroll, it's not Schonstein, it's something else, but it's the easy to read, you just read through it, an easy Hebrew thing. And he has a whole series of these, and he would take them with him. And this is a picture of him in Gaza, in some kind of break that they have in one of the houses, and probably, I would imagine, shooting going on outside. And you can read what this person who wrote this to me, anonymously, he didn't know how to get through to us. We sent it to someone who sent it to someone who sent it. I later tracked him down. But Maoz was able to keep all these things up very nicely in the army.
So Maoz did his 14 months of training, and then he started, doing defending places and doing his active duty. And comes October 7th, Simchas Torah, Shabbos. Maoz happened to be home out of the army that Shabbos. They get out once every week or 2 weeks for Shabbos. And he wasn't in our yeshuv. He had taken our car and gone to spend Simchas Torah with friends somewhere else. And Eitan goes to shul where we live. It starts very early, so at 7:30 they were already in the middle of davening, and on Simchas Torah, not on a regular Shabbos, a little bit later. So Eitan is in shul, and somebody comes in at 7:30, bangs on the bima, and says, "Israel is at war. We don't know what's going on. We don't know what's happening, but everyone should go home. Tell your families." Take your cell phones, turn them on so that we can contact everyone if needed. And if you don't have your gun on you, most of the men in our yeshuv have guns. Take your gun, have it on you. We don't know how this is going to affect us. We don't know what's happening. So Eitan comes home, he wakes me up, he tells me what's happening. I turn on my phone. He goes back to shul. A little while later, Maoz hears something wherever he is. I don't even know what he heard. And he calls my phone, and I picked it up on Shabbos, on Yom Tov. And he didn't even say anything. He just understood from the fact that I picked up the phone, then whatever rumors he had been hearing were true, that something very serious is going on. So he just says, "I'm coming home to get my stuff," hangs up the phone, drives home, is in our house for 7 minutes, just packs up all of his gear, switches into his army uniform. And we only have one car, so he needed to get to his base. So he just took our car. We eventually got it back, but we didn't know if we were ever going to see it again. And he drives up to his base near Netanya, and he and all of his unit were flown down south to defend, to give support and defend what was going on there by 1:30 in the afternoon. They were already there. Okay, terrifying. But I have a son who's in active duty, and there's a war, so that makes sense that he's there. But when I got married and moved to Israel, I don't think I really thought about the fact that I would have sons going to the army. Eventually, I think I figured that out, but my son went to the army, the older son went, he came back. While he was there, I was worried about him. Then the next one went, our son Shachar is here. He went to the army. While he was there, I was worried about him. Then he came, finished, and came home. Then Maoz, he went, okay. But never in my wildest dreams did I imagine the scenario where I would have 3 sons fighting in the army, but in a war. But that's what happened on Simchas Torah. First Maoz leaves. A few hours later, Shachar gets a phone call from his commander. Pack your things up and come up north. And he leaves. And then later that day, towards the end of Shabbos, our son Eliezer, he's our older son who had finished many years ago in the army. He has 2 kids, lives in our community, and he gets a call. Pack your things up, come up north. And he packs and leaves. So by the time Yom Tov was over on October 7th, I have 3 sons in one down south, like near Gaza, and 2 up north. All of them, as far as I'm concerned, in grave danger. And, we don't know what to do with ourselves. So at first we didn't sleep for a little while, and at a certain point, I just stopped listening to the news, and that helped at some point. But what also, just in general, we tried to, everyone around us tried to do, to help the soldiers. In the beginning, there wasn't enough food and equipment for them, and all of the people in our community tried to do things to help everyone, and around the world. I know that your community was very involved in lots of different things, and there's a special tefillot and prayers, and then rallies and gathering, raising money for equipment and doing things for families of the families of the soldiers who went off to Miluim. And when Maoz was in Gaza for 7 weeks, and he came home for a few days. That's the only time he was home the whole time. From October 7th, he was home for 3 days. And when he came home, we were trying to tell him about what was going on in the world, because, you know, he didn't have any phone or any contact with the outside world that whole time. And we were describing to him about all the things that all of Am Yisrael was doing. And the way that we saw it was that all of Am Yisrael was giving support and doing, each person doing the thing, whatever they could do in order to support Israel, and then to support the soldiers. And the main beneficiary of all of this, all of what everyone was doing, are the soldiers. And at the very tip of this pyramid is soldiers like Maoz in these elite units who were always at the forefront of the fighting. And we tried to give them a sense of what all of you and all of the people in Israel were doing to help make it so that they could be their very best in what they were doing. Here are some pictures of Maoz and his unit getting food and supplies and pizza from people like you. So as I mentioned, that first 7 weeks, he was in Gaza, and we didn't have no contact with him. We would get once in a while an update, but we didn't speak to him at all, except that the one time one of the soldiers came into Gaza with a smartphone and allowed the soldiers in his unit to record WhatsApp messages to send to their parents. And then when the soldier came out, he sent it to one of the mothers, who started sending it to all the mothers. And we have a mothers WhatsApp group. And so the mothers started getting their messages from their sons, and they were reporting back about their beautiful messages and how special it was to hear them, and all the nice things that they were saying, and how much they miss home. And I was waiting and waiting to get my message. And finally, I got my message, and it was 11 seconds long. And what he said was, "Hi, mommy, ze Maoz, it's Maoz. Hakol sababa iti," which means like everything is great. It's just Israeli slang for like no worries, no, all is good in the world. Hakol sababa iti. Hakol sababa iti, zehu idkanti. That's it. I have updated you. So like over and out. And during the Shiva, we were thinking that this statement, we were playing over the recording during the Shiva, and this statement is like kind of like sums up Maoz, big smile on his face. Everything is always okay, trying to make the best of the situation. Not a man of many words, a man of actions, and more me'adva said harbe. And that was Maoz. So in Israel, there's a thing that you do is make a bumper sticker for your son who's fallen in the war. It's just a thing that everyone does. And like my son Elkanah right now is on a trip with other siblings of fallen soldiers with the Friends of IDF, and what?
Yeah,
Right, so they're in Manhattan yesterday, and there's a video like they're all putting one after the other on some like pole in Manhattan. They're bumper stickers, each one of their brother. So we made this bumper sticker, and we actually made some smaller versions to give out to you at the end tonight. So you're all welcome to take. You can put them on your phone or whatever you want. You can do it. So this was what kind of, Maoz is just a kind of kid, normal boy, fine, very, very good at sports in the army, but in day-to-day life, we just kind of thought of him as like a normal kid. Like one of my defense mechanisms when he was in Gaza was that I would say to myself, like, we would hear Lo Aleinu about boys that were killed, and then everyone is talking about them, that they're just like these amazing boys. They started a whole farm on their own, and they wrote this poetry, and they drew, and they played instruments, and they did all kinds of amazing things in their life. One's a doctor, this, that, everything. And I said to myself, okay, Maoz is safe, because he's just like normal. There's nothing special to say about him. So I know like nothing's gonna happen to him, because so we were joking around after during the Shiva that we weren't going to find, diaries filled with his innermost feelings. He wasn't a talker. He wasn't one that would express like how he feels. Just, hang out. He was very well liked, very popular, but, not one to talk a lot. There are enough people in his family that talk a lot. So, he didn't. And there's this other phenomena in Israel. I don't know, maybe it's prevalent here, but where young people seem to write a lot of poetry. And very often a soldier will be killed tragically, and his family will find notebooks filled with poetry. And then famous Israeli singers, put the words to music and make the songs. And we knew we were not going to be finding any notebooks full of poetry from Maoz. About a month after he was killed, we got a box of his personal effects. And there were notebooks there, but they did not have poetry. But what they did have in them were lists. And lists. And these lists, some of them were very mundane, like, what are my plans for tomorrow? And what are my plans for the next week? But then we saw some like, what do I need to do from now till Yom Kippur? What do I want to accomplish during Chorif Zman? What do I want to try to learn when I'm home during the vacation? Things that I can do when I'm home in the vacation, not to so that I stay connected and I don't waste my time. And have some lists, and these lists were written, I don't know if you can see, but like an awful handwriting, terrible spelling, difficult to read, because he had a hard time with that. Like when he wanted to send someone a simple text message, he would always have to ask me how to spell like the most basic words in Hebrew, because his spelling was just so bad because of his learning disabilities. So here are some lists that we found, just an example of some of them. Expectations for myself for tomorrow. Wake up on time. Every list said wake up on time, because he really, really wanted to, and it was important to him. He very often did not succeed, but he wrote that on every single list. Try to be focused all day. Have kavanah in my prayers. Here's one for the upcoming week. Go to sleep on time. Wake up for davening, then I feel better all day. Pay attention to what I say and how I speak to people. Try to learn well in the morning learning session. So these simple lists that, we all make, but he has these in his notebook, and we see running themes through them, simple steps, things to do, but we see what's important to him. And then we found a list about what are his commitments for his army service. We saw that this boy that we thought we knew is like such a little tzaddik, right? Because here we have learn every day in the army, and he did. We have testimony from his friends that he did it. And go to yeshiva, go back and visit yeshiva for Shabbos once every 2 months, so that I stay connected to the feeling in yeshiva. Wear tzitzis all the time. He did. Write a halachic question every day in my notebook, and then try to look at my service in a positive way, because it's really hard to. You complain and get disappointed all the time. To be a servant of God during and after my service, to succeed in helping others, take initiative, don't get upset and frustrated by little things, be careful about halacha without cutting corners. And then we found a list of his expectations of himself as a magist. Now, magist is the one who carries the mag that Eitan was describing. Now, when Maoz was given that job, he was very disappointed. He wanted to have a different job. He wanted to be the one like his brother Shachar, who had a Negev, and the Negev is like this cool gun, and you're in the front of the line, and you're leading everyone, and that's what he wanted. But he got this job, so he made a list for himself what he expects of himself. Not to complain. It's really easy to complain, right? Don't slow others down by walking slowly. It's so heavy that often the magist is the one who slows down the group, and then they have to walk at a slower pace. Always give 100%, try and help others, and never give up. And his commander told us that one time when they were on one of their long walks, he took the mag from Maoz for a little bit. And he said he couldn't believe how heavy it was and his commander is really in shape, right? But he said just Maoz would just make it seem like it was nothing. So then when he took it from him, like he suddenly saw how heavy it really was. And we realized when we were looking at these notebooks with all the lists, so we realized that although Maoz didn't write poetry, that these lists gave us an insight into his values and the things that were important for him. And that through these lists, we were able to see Maoz's inner world, and that maybe these lists were Maoz's poetry. And then, so since Maoz fell, we've spoken to different groups and kids. Like I'm a teacher in a high school, and I remember one day I sent out this list of like, what can you do today in memory of Maoz? And what did I write? I wrote, ask for help when you need it. If you don't understand something, say that you don't understand. And one of my students says to me, after you sent out that list, I asked my friends if they would help me study for a math test. And a 10th grader, she has trouble socially. She says, like, all the years, I've never asked friends to study with me. I always have to go get a private tutor and pay for it. But after you sent out that list about Maoz, like I just, had the courage to go and ask my friends, and it was wonderful. And that same day, a friend of Eitan's, not a teenager, came. He wrote to us that that we sent out this list that had some other things on it, and when he saw it, he that day he had a work meeting, and he came to the meeting and he realized that he hadn't prepared properly for the meeting, and he didn't understand what was going on. And normally he would kind of try to hide it and like figure out during the meeting what was going on so that nobody would know, and he wouldn't be embarrassed. But he thought of the list that we sent out, and he said to everyone, look, I don't know what's going on, I didn't prepare properly. And then they explained it to him, and he was able to follow, and all went well. So what we found is that when we talk about things that Maoz did, and then people take that to heart, it gives us a lot of strength. We were asked many times, we've been asked a number of times, we've been asked if, you made Aliyah to Israel, and you because of that, your son was killed, right? Do you regret the fact that you moved to Israel, that, now you lost a son because of it? And both of us right away responded, no. It's very difficult to lose a child. Unfortunately, people lose children from other things as well, from car accidents, from sickness. And on a personal level, we're all grappling with it, our children and us as well, of course. I remember that about a month, 5 weeks after the funeral, after Maoz was killed, we went to a wedding of his close friend from the army, the one who we had a chavrusa with in Mesilat Yesharim. And we went to the wedding, and I think until that day, I was in denial, worrying about my children. And I went to this wedding, and we were standing under the chuppah, And also he spoke about Maoz under the chuppah. Unfortunately, today, at every single wedding that you go to, the chassan talks about one or two or three of his close friends who have fallen. It's just crazy. So he's talking about Maoz under the chuppah and crying, and I start crying. It's like my first time really crying, and I realize that Maoz is not going to be standing under the chuppah. Maoz is not going to have children. So what we're doing today, what we've been doing now is going around and speaking to people, is that this is his legacy. If some of the values that were important to Maoz, some of the things that he did about setting manageable goals and making small steps in order to reach those goals, and asking for help when you need it, and saying that you don't understand what you don't understand. There are other things that we've mentioned about Maoz. If any of you take something from what we've said and try to integrate that in your life, and you do it in memory of Maoz, so in that way, he will have a legacy and he will live on in all of us. So we appreciate very much for all of you for coming. Thank you.
Anyone has any questions?
We have stickers, a lot of them. People want, they're welcome to take stickers.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for coming.
Thank you very, very much. And thank you. I also just want to especially thank Menashe and Seth Katz. There's a lot of effort, and Josh Price and Insimi Franco. And we should all be zocha to do something Li'ilui Nishmaso. And thank you for the beautiful message. We'll have Marvin here in a few minutes. Thank you.